Have you ever noticed that certain people just seem different? Not in an obvious way, not in a way that's easy to point to or put into words, but there's something about them that feels settled, grounded, like they're operating from a place inside themselves that doesn't get rattled easily. Their thinking is clear. Their mood is consistent. They don't spiral when things get difficult. They don't need to talk themselves into doing hard things. They just do them quietly, without drama, and move on. And if you spend enough time around these people, you start to notice something else. Almost all of them walk, every single day. Not because someone told them to. Not because they're training for a race or following a program. Just because they walk, and they have been walking, quietly and consistently, for years. This is not a coincidence. The connection between daily walking and a specific kind of psychological profile is one of the most consistent findings in behavioral and neuroscience research of the past 2 decades. And it goes far deeper than mood or stress relief, the benefits most people already know about. What researchers have found is that people who walk every single day don't just feel better. Over time, they think differently. They make decisions differently. They respond to difficulty differently. They relate to themselves and to other people differently. Their psychology, shaped by years of a single daily habit, becomes measurably distinct. And what happens next is fascinating, because these changes aren't random. They follow a specific biological logic. Walking, done consistently, alters the brain in ways that directly shape personality, emotional regulation, resilience, creativity, and self-perception. Not as side effects, as direct, documented neurological outcomes that researchers can now measure, image, and track over time. Most people think of walking as something the body does. What the research shows is that walking is something the brain does too, and that the brain that walks every day becomes, over time, a fundamentally different brain than the one that doesn't. Let's start at the very beginning with what happens inside your brain within the first 10 minutes of any walk, because this is where the psychological foundation gets laid every single day. When you begin walking, your brain increases production of 3 neurochemicals simultaneously. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation, forward momentum, and reward. Serotonin, the chemical of emotional stability, calm, and social connection. And norepinephrine, the signal of focused alertness and clear attention. These 3 chemicals, released together in a low-stress, rhythmic movement environment, create a very specific mental state that researchers describe as relaxed alertness. Not the anxious, jittery alertness of caffeine. Not the foggy, heavy calm of fatigue. A clear, open, forward-facing mental state that feels to most people who experience it regularly like their clearest, most capable version of themselves. People who walk every day spend a significant portion of their waking hours either in this state or recovering from it. And over months and years, that repeated neurochemical experience begins to reshape their psychological baseline. Their resting mood lifts. Their anxiety threshold rises. Their default mental state, even on days when they haven't walked yet, begins to resemble the state that walking reliably produces. The brain learns from repetition, and daily walkers are teaching their brains, one session at a time, what normal is supposed to feel like. Have you ever noticed that people who walk regularly seem less reactive? That they don't get pulled into drama as easily, don't catastrophize as quickly, and don't lose themselves in small frustrations the way the people around them sometimes do? Tell me in the comments, do you know someone like this? Or are you already this person? If you enjoy understanding the quiet science happening inside your body and mind, consider subscribing. And if this is already resonating, tap the like button. It helps more people find this. What most people don't realize is that daily walking physically changes the structure of the brain in ways that directly determine psychological traits, not metaphorically, but measurably, visibly, on a brain scan. The hippocampus is the region of the brain most responsible for memory formation, emotional regulation, and the stress response. It is also one of the brain regions most vulnerable to the effects of chronic stress, poor sleep, and sedentary behavior. In people who don't move regularly, the hippocampus tends to shrink over time, a process that contributes to increased anxiety, emotional volatility, impaired memory, and a heightened, less controllable stress response. The brain becomes, in a structural sense, less capable of handling difficulty. In people who walk daily, the opposite happens. Research from the University of British Columbia found that regular aerobic walking increased hippocampal volume by approximately 2% over the course of 1 year. In a brain region that normally shrinks with age, a 2% increase represents a complete reversal of the expected trajectory. The hippocampus of a consistent daily walker in their 60s can look structurally similar to that of a sedentary person in their early 40s. And because the hippocampus governs emotional regulation and stress response, this structural difference shows up directly in behavior and personality. Daily walkers are measurably better at managing difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. They can hold complexity, sitting with uncertainty, processing discomfort, tolerating ambiguity, without immediately needing to escape or resolve it. Psychologists call this capacity distress tolerance. It is one of the strongest predictors of long-term mental health, relationship quality, and sound decision-making that researchers have identified. Daily walkers don't have easier lives. They have better-equipped brains for handling the lives they have. There is something else happening in the daily walker's psychology that research has consistently documented, and it has to do with identity rather than biology. Habits, when practiced long enough, stop being things you do and become things you are. A person who has walked every single day for 2 or 3 years doesn't think of walking as a task on their to-do list. They think of themselves as someone who walks. That identity shift from "I walk sometimes" to "I am a person who walks every day" changes the entire psychological relationship with the habit. It no longer requires motivation or willpower to maintain. It actually requires motivation and willpower to break. This identity-based psychology extends far beyond walking itself. People who have successfully built and maintained a daily walking habit have demonstrated to themselves repeatedly and without exception that they are capable of consistency, that they follow through on commitments, that they do what they say they will do, even when they don't feel like it. And that self-perception, "I am someone who keeps promises to myself," transfers to other areas of life with remarkable reliability. Daily walkers tend to be more consistent in their work, their relationships, their nutrition, and their sleep than non-walkers. Not because walking directly causes these outcomes, but because the psychology of maintained self-consistency generalizes across domains. The brain that has proven to itself every day that it can show up for a walk has learned something far deeper about its own reliability. And it carries that knowledge into everything else it does. Quietly inside your body, this daily consistency also produces a hormonal environment that directly supports psychological stability. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, follows a daily rhythm. In sedentary people, this rhythm can become dysregulated. Cortisol peaks at the wrong times, stays elevated when it should be dropping, and produces a background hum of tension and reactivity that many people have simply accepted as their normal. In people who walk every day, cortisol rhythm is measurably more balanced. Morning peaks are healthier and more energizing. Afternoon cortisol drops more cleanly. The overall cortisol load across the day is lower. And the psychological experience of that hormonal pattern is significant: greater calm, more stable energy throughout the day, less reactivity to minor stressors, and reliably better sleep quality at night. Think of your cortisol system like the temperature regulation in a well-maintained home. When everything is calibrated properly, the temperature stays comfortable regardless of what the weather is doing outside. You barely notice the system working. But when it's dysregulated, spiking too high under small provocations, failing to settle in the evenings, running at a low-level high all day, you feel it constantly. Every small stressor feels larger than it should. Every demand feels heavier. Every evening takes longer to wind down. Daily walkers, through the repeated cortisol-regulating effect of moderate rhythmic movement, tend to have well-calibrated internal systems. They feel difficulty. They are not immune to stress or hardship, but they are not controlled by it in the way that people with dysregulated cortisol often are. Researchers studying creativity and cognitive performance have found something that genuinely surprises most people when they first encounter it. Walking, specifically, enhances divergent thinking, the kind of open, associative, possibility-generating thought that underlies creativity, problem-solving, and the sudden arrival of insight, more reliably than almost any other activity studied. A landmark Stanford University study found that creative output increased by an average of 81% while people were walking compared to when they were sitting. 81%. And perhaps more remarkably, that creative enhancement persisted for a measurable period after the walk ended. Meaning, walking doesn't just make you more creative while you're moving. It leaves your brain in a more open, generative state for the hours that follow. The neurological reason for this is now well understood. Walking activates the brain's default mode network, the background processing system responsible for generating connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, surfacing memories and associations, and producing the sudden insights that feel as though they come from nowhere. This network is suppressed during focused, screen-based work, during multitasking, and during states of stress or anxiety. It activates reliably during relaxed, rhythmic, low-demand movement. Daily walkers activate this network every single day. And over time, researchers have found that they develop what is described as higher baseline creative fluency, a resting mental state that is more open, more associative, and more generative than that of people who don't walk regularly. Their minds, even when sitting still, are more likely to produce unexpected connections, novel solutions, and creative insights. This is why so many of history's most creative and intellectually productive figures were obsessive daily walkers. Charles Darwin walked 3 miles every morning on his thinking path before beginning any scientific work. Beethoven walked for hours through the streets of Vienna every afternoon. Nietzsche wrote that all truly great thoughts are conceived while walking. Steve Jobs conducted walking meetings because he believed movement produced genuinely better thinking than any conference room ever could. They were not following a wellness trend. They were, whether consciously or not, following their own neurology. Now, let's talk about something that sits at the deepest level of why daily walkers seem psychologically different, and that is their relationship with their own mind. People who walk every day have made a daily choice to protect time that produces no immediate measurable output, no email answered, no task completed, no visible deliverable at the end. In a world that constantly measures worth through productivity, output, and visible achievement, this is quietly radical. And the psychological effect of regularly spending time that belongs entirely to your own thoughts, not to a screen, not to a demand, not to anyone else's expectations, is profound and cumulative. Daily walkers consistently report a stronger sense of psychological autonomy, a clearer sense of what they actually think and feel, distinct from the noise of external opinions and social pressure, a more reliable and honest access to their own inner voice. Psychologists who study this describe it as psychological ownership of one's mental life, and it is directly associated with lower rates of anxiety, higher self-esteem, greater emotional authenticity, and measurably higher life satisfaction across every demographic group studied. There is also something that happens in the long-term relationship between a daily walker and their own body that deserves attention. Most people relate to their body primarily through discomfort, through pain, illness, fatigue, or dissatisfaction with appearance. Walking every day, slowly and over time, shifts that relationship. The body becomes something you move through the world in, rather than something you manage or fight against. Daily walkers report a significantly stronger sense of physical self-trust, a confidence in their body's capability and resilience than sedentary people, regardless of fitness level or physical appearance. That shift in body relationship feeds back into psychological well-being in ways that are difficult to fully separate from the neurochemical and structural changes walking produces. Together, they create a person who feels more at home in themselves, more capable, more grounded, more present. And over years, that accumulates into exactly the quality you notice in people who have walked every day for a long time, that settled, unshakable groundedness that has nothing to do with their circumstances and everything to do with what they have quietly built inside themselves, one walk at a time. What struck you most in this video? The brain structure changes, the creativity research, the identity shift, or the relationship with your own mind? Leave it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. If you enjoy discovering the quiet science happening inside your body and mind, subscribe for more. New videos every week. In the next video, we'll explore something even more fascinating. What happens to your brain and your body during the very first 10 minutes of a walk, minute by minute, and why that opening window may be the single most important part of your entire day. Your body is not failing you. It has been waiting for the right information. Now you have it.